Empaths, welcome back to Journey Through the Tarot, back to my safe space. This series is based on Dirty and Divine, a transformative journey through tarot by Alice B. Grist. She spent a day with each card. We're spending a week, and I'm getting a lot of the information about each card from a book by one of my teachers, The Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. And we're working with the Waite-Smith symbolism in the Rider Tarot deck. And if you're interested in picking up any of those items, they're in my Amazon store, linked in the description of this video. And we're talking about our week with the Justice card. It was an amazing week, right? And then we're going to be introducing the Hermit. So let's jump in. As soon as I published, actually it was as soon as last week's video premiered, as soon as the premiere was over, I got a message from my best friend. He's on this journey with me as well. I talk about him a lot. He's very insightful and connected to these cards intuitively and has amazing insights and experiences around it. So I love sharing his synchronicities. It really inspires me and helps me understand more deeply. So I want to share with you. So right after that premiere, he contacted me and let me know that he started telling people off who were wasting his time. And he's been having that experience of people being time wasters, and asking himself what his accountability in the experience was. And this week he started realizing that other people's integrity is really up to them, and he has the power to say yes or no to them. And one person in particular, he had an intuitive sense that the person was going to stand him up and waste his time, canceling plans. And he sort of just said, don't ever talk to me again. And let him know that that was unacceptable behavior, like last minute cancellations. He really woke up to the fact that people he was attracting in were using him, and that it wasn't fair or just. Justice card. Wanting his attention and validation by setting up the date, but lacking the social skills to show up. Their lack of malicious intent makes for an even trickier situation, because they would accuse him of overreacting when he communicated his displeasure at them canceling plans and or wasting his time. He decided to take a hiatus from dating for self-reflection, which transitions perfectly into the Hermit week, creating balance internally. Balance is associated with the Justice card, right? As we see the scales. And remember from last week, the sword represents responsibility as well as mercy. We have the number 11 here. And for me, the number 471 came up as a synchronous message for me. I befriended another tarot reader from YouTube last week. I talked about him, Ramblin' Mike. He became my 471st friend. And synchronously, I went onto YouTube and noticed that that was my subscriber count too at that time. And it was just an odd synchronicity that number showed up in both places. Sort of like a balancing of scales. And I was kind of taken aback by that. And something inside of me said, pay attention to this. And when I looked up the meaning of that number, 471, the message encoded in 471 relates to the field of creativity and hobbies, and says that very soon you will have an opportunity to make money on your hobby. Take this with due seriousness and try to use the chance to change your life to the maximum. After all, if everything works out, you will have a job that you can give yourself up to entirely with joy and passion. Not everyone succeeds in it. And that's amazing that was the description, because the Justice card is about making changes that will have a long-lasting effect, even for your entire life. So that was interesting. And that came up again later this week, that theme of joy and passion. And, talking to my friend all week, I was talking to him about his hopelessness in relationships, and even reminded him that he's found high quality connections when he was out exploring and enjoying life, not putting so much focus and emphasis on it or pressure on the situation. And I found this meme that I sent to him, and it was the perfect quote. It said, "The biggest mistake in a relationship is giving your heart to someone who is in need of a brain." It's so funny, but it was something that kept coming up for him. Wanting emotional intimacy, and that being something that you value, and being met with sort of this lack of social skill, lack of mindfulness, and lack of self-awareness can be very frustrating. So, Justice card representing mercy is like, have mercy on yourself, right? Why do you continue to put yourself in this situation? But at the same time, not blaming yourself for the other's actions either. It's this balancing act, right? Because he really called it when this person, he's like, of course, this is what keeps happening, the way I'm meeting people right now. So I was like, it sounds like the common denominator is the way you're meeting people. It's not you. So rethink that. And that's why when I presented, remember all the people you met doing something you were enjoying and communing with friends and having fun. And it seems like that's been the best way up until now. So and I personally had a lot of opportunities this week to see the truth of the connections in my friendships. I was going through medical testing, and that alone was justice showing up for me. My best friend and I supported each other as we both went to the doctor for testing to make sure we were healthy. And I've been suffering with anemia probably for quite some time, undiagnosed, and other issues health-wise. But I finally got answers this week. Started taking an iron supplement prescribed by my doctor just yesterday. I started taking it. And I will end up having minor surgery in a couple months to potentially end the cycle of poor health that I've been dealing with most of my adult life. And some friends were extremely supportive despite going through their own stuff, right? Everyone has their own stuff. And it really revealed who cares genuinely. I think a health scare can do that. Also maturity, right? Because if you're young and you've never really gone through anything, you might not have that much concern around it, right? You might just not have the experience of awareness around how scary that can be. So some cared genuinely and others weren't all that great at feigning concern. Granted, I didn't really share with very many details. I just sort of said as little as possible about it. And that alone was eye-opening, who I felt comfortable, opening up to about what I was going through. Balance in relationships or lack thereof was a theme in Justice Week in general. So seeing how there is imbalance, and where is my consent showing up in that, and what am I agreeing to unconsciously? Not just for me, but it came up for other people, and we'll talk about that a little later. And my best friend, again, he had a lot of experiences. It's always too much to share, but he went to his favorite metaphysical store and bought an Archangel Michael room spray. I think that's what it was. It was the last one, and it said the word justice right on it. And Archangel Michael has the sword. cutting toxic ties and, cords of attachment. Later that day, a guy he was talking to, my best friend was that my friend was talking to. My best friend was talking to this guy. He let him know that this guy he was talking to thought that my best friend was too good for him and that he couldn't live with the pressure to keep up with him. And my best friend didn't argue or try to convince, he just said, okay. He accepted it as the truth, right? He didn't argue with that. And it was actually really refreshing because this whole week he's had revelations about connections and people being really honest. And even when it was, this probably won't work out long term, it felt respectful that people were being honest and he felt valued, that his time wasn't wasted. So, he found a value there for himself, right? That honesty, no matter what, even if it appears to be a harsh truth, it feels respectful to be told the truth. That's something he values. And I think that's right in alignment with the Justice card, the truth. And then my best friend and I were talking about the blessings that came from moving back to our hometowns, respectively. He got to spend the last 2 years of his abuela's life with her and eventually move to another town a few hours away into his very own apartment for the first time after dealing with so much roommate drama. And I too am living alone, healing family trauma, and am able to take care of my health with the support of my family very close by. And my best friend shared that he was thinking about how hard it would be for me to be taking care of this health issue in New York City or in LA. And I had a flashback to this soul coaching vlog. I go through book journeys, much like the journey through the Tarot, only they're books with chapters of exercises and things. So I shared them, a few on this channel. One was called Soul Coaching by Denise Lynn. And I had a flashback to one of the chapters, and it came up to ask for guidance about why I'm here in general, or just here, specifically in this place. And what came in was to take care of yourself physically and get healthy. And I was at the gym at the time when that guidance came in, and took the guidance to mean optimizing myself, right? Optimizing my health by working out. I had no idea how on point that guidance was until this very week, right? So the consequences of your choices coming up, the consequences of my choices are in alignment with the Justice card, cause and effect, right? And sometimes even related to due karma, as things balance out. Because I relate karma to a balance of experiences, right? Having all perspectives through experiences. It's not punishment as far as I see it. It's just kind of a balancing. And interesting because, the last few years I was in New York, I had anemia undiagnosed, and it was just getting harder and harder. I was getting more and more depleted, and I was blaming myself for not doing enough, for not having enough discipline sometimes. I just didn't know what was wrong with me. I felt effective. And, once that's cleared up, it's like, oh, interesting. Like, it had been very hard to get out of bed. I'd crawl out of bed and I kind of would never really feel fully awake. I'd be very groggy. I'd have a headache. And today, after just one day of taking iron supplements, I got right out of bed at 7:30 in the morning, and I just felt like, wow, what a difference in just one day of taking an iron supplement. So I have a feeling it's going to bring really lasting change for me in my life. Because again, I just thought it was because I wasn't disciplined enough. Like I had a desire to get up with the sun, but I felt like that would be empowering for me. It helped me accomplish more, but I just was so hard to do because of literal health issues. Okay, and just this week, are you surprised? The House voted to impeach Trump, right? He was charged with committing high crimes and misdemeanors, abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, and he does face removal from office by the Senate. And that all relates to the Justice Card, whether you believe it's just or not, right? Who am I to say? But the Justice Card does involve law. It involves the courts. It involves crime. And it was funny because I was talking to my best friend about relationships, probably petty stuff, you know how you talk to your best friend. And he was like, and I was like, could this be about the Justice Card? Because I'm always looking for things to share. That's what happens, right? It's like having a gratitude practice. You're looking for things to be grateful for. Well, I'm walking around looking for things that relate to justice, right? So I have something to share in the vlog. And who knows, maybe creating those experiences for my deeper understanding, obviously, clearly, at least in part. And not that I created that. I mean, that was in the works. But he was like, oh my God, Rachel, Trump was impeached. And I was like, what? Just now? Because I just said the Justice Card. And I was floored by that. A lot of people I know think that's ridiculous, right? I'm currently in a red state, and a lot of my friends think that's karma, justice being served. That's the right thing, right? So, I always try to stay as neutral as I can and stay impartial in a certain way, just because I never feel like I have all the information. Because, I don't want to be swayed by one piece of information or one perspective. And I don't want to sort of decide and or make a judgment call. So that might seem wishy-washy, but I sort of feel like, what does it help if I get emotionally involved in something like that? How would that serve anything? So for me, I'm just kind of observing. I'm such an observer in life. And that skill comes in handy for my work. Not getting, sort of, when it's, interpersonal or familial or ancestral, it's more challenging, right? Getting involved emotionally for an emotional empath. But I work hard to stay detached in situations like that, where my emotional instability or anxiety or whatever, overwhelm, isn't going to serve me and isn't going to serve the situation. So I just try to stay neutral and continue to observe, because it's out of my hands. Worrying isn't going to really help. I actually went to dinner with a few people the other night, just after it happened, and the impeachment, and they were all kind of talking about it. And I just deliberately and specifically bowed out of conversations when they were talking about it. Just, I don't know. I never feel like I need to put my 2 cents in on those things, because I don't feel well informed enough. And I think a lot of people feel like they're so well informed when they're really not. And I don't like to presume I know all the time, Anyway, tangent. Okay. Um, so my best friend is doing the Calling in the One, which is another book I did a blog series on my Instagram, urban_empath. I think it was in 2017. July of 2017, I think I started that journey on Instagram as kind of a blog. And this week, in the Justice Week, the work focused on forgiveness and cutting out toxic ties, and working with your wounds. In chapter 11, which justice is the 11th card, right, in Roman numerals, Catherine Woodward Thomas, who is the author of Calling in the One, writes about if there haven't been successful relationships in your family, forming a loving and happy partnership can feel nothing short of disloyal. And that is true of any departure from the way it's always been, right? In your family, in your ancestry. We walk through guilt to achieve the result or consequence we want if it's independent from the family system and the way things have always been. That's true in family constellation work too. We have to prepare for that, plan for that. It's a natural experience, actually. We sacrifice our success out of fear of causing pain to our parents, or at least aggravate the parts of them that are unhappy. In session work with clients, we often have to look at that and work through it. And that's just one of those truths, right? We often we feel guilty being happy, right? And there's a ceiling on that experience for us because it's a covert way of showing loyalty, right? Dad was always sad, so, I can't be too happy. Or mom never had a healthy relationship. She never felt supported. So if I create that, I'm being disloyal, and we walk through some guilt. And we have to look at that, right? We look at that and we prepare. We prepare and we support the client in family constellation with the expectation that that's probably going to show up. And it might not be subtle. It might actually come from guilt tripping, right? From those parents, or sabotage in some way, one way or another, right? It might show up. So we look at that, just getting to the truth, and finding some balance, right? Finding the balance of being supported by the family system and not as controlled by it. Finding a greater state of freedom to create a new paradigm, which is the role of the future generations. But it gets mixed up sometimes. There's a lot of times there's disorder in the system. So it's much more difficult than just doing it, right? There you feel like so many unseen forces at work. My colleague at work and one of my clients are both Libras, which is associated with the Justice card. And they are both fair, honest, merciful, understanding, and balanced women. Really powerful. Powerful in their kindness and fairness. In their balance of perspectives. And I appreciate them both so much. I worked a lot with my Libra client this week in bringing justice to her inner child, releasing outdated and unfair contracts and relationship agreements, and creating organization, order, and integration in her family system. We also worked on worthiness around having needs and emotions without feeling compelled to justify their existence, right? We often get into that where we feel we have to explain or justify that we have needs or feelings. They just are, And we also found through exploration with her subconscious that instead of matching or absorbing the anger around her, she could transmute it in the light of her joy. She doesn't have to be harmed, burning up in all that anger, which would be the consequence of not overriding that inclination. So oftentimes we feel compelled to fight fire with fire. And something I learned with her by observing and witnessing her process, she was able to transmute others' harmful energies that were oftentimes directed at her in the family system, not by fighting fire with fire, but getting into a state of joy for what she has, her experience, her family that she's created, right? What she's created in the world, finding joy in that, joy in the activities she loves, whatever it is, getting into that emotional state and shining that light out, things were transmuted. The power of joy, the healing and transmutive power of joy. I was so inspired by that. That informed me in my process. And joy came up a lot this week. And I think joy can be justice for the black sheep of the family, or the scapegoat, or the healer, the artist, the sensitive. That can be justice, right, for all the hardship. So creating a balance, creating the opposite experience is what healing is really all about. So observing that and witnessing that was really powerful. And it was about consequences, right? They come up with the justice card, because the consequence of giving into the anger. And she's very psychic. So she was like, what's the Reiki principle about anger? And I was like, just for today, do not anger. But I don't think it means disown your anger, right? I think that would be terrible advice. I don't think it means disown your anger. Don't allow it. Actually, don't acknowledge it. I don't think that's healthy advice. I think don't attach to it, identify with it, and then spill it and spew it over other people, and then burn yourself alive in it, because that comes with detrimental consequences for you and those around you. So she was able to turn that into joy. It was so beautiful and powerful. The power of joy also came up for me in my business alchemy session. I'm in a business alchemy program with my mentor, one of my mentors, Shelley Poovey of Body Attune. And we work with inner alchemy and the consciousness of our business, of our purpose, of money, right? Of archetypes. And a lot of amazing elements. I've learned a lot in this program. This is my second go around. And she worked with me one-on-one in front of the group. And what came up was, instead of creating or working from a place of obligation, which associates exchange of my vitality for money, now I'll ask, can I embody joy first? My mentor shared that lack of joy and exposure to trauma can create anemia as we remain in fight or flight for prolonged periods of time, which was mind-blowing to me. And healing ancestral trauma not only benefits my family, but heals my physical body. So again, cause and effect, and also equilibrium, right? Represented by the scales of the Justice card. So, because I come from, I believe in the philosophy that all bodies are aligned, right? So while anemia can be caused by physical things, and it clearly is, right? It's clearly caused by things in the physical body, in the physical world, or whatever, what you're ingesting, and, you know, other causes, what you're leaving out of your diet and all of that. And that was yet another thing about justice that occurred to me was, I was 14 years old and I decided, I saw some, I guess it was, I don't want to say is the word propaganda, whatever it is, very convincing to me as a sensitive around veganism. So I just stopped eating meat then and there. And I felt like that was what I needed to do. I felt like I had so much compassion for the justice of animals, and I couldn't bear to think of their mistreatment. And that's one way getting my emotions so enmeshed and involved in a cause has had detrimental consequences for me, because my body was so depleted by so many things. And this week I finally saw it as, wow, I was putting the justice for the animals above myself, above my own health. And this week I really looked at how about justice for me, and what's good for me and my body? And I still want to live compassionately, because that's something I value, right? Looking at values as well. And where can I find balance in that without feeling like a self-betrayal of what's important to me? Can I have logic and reasoning around that? What's a reasonable solution here? So getting clear on that for me. And wanting to be just and fair, and consider, all the information. Talking with friends and clients this week, something that came up a lot was that the truth teller of the family is often shamed, deemed bad, and undervalued. There was also a link to seeing the truth and shouldering more of the responsibility in relationships, particularly when it comes to upholding boundaries. But this week was about creating change, doing something different to have long-term positive effects, all involving standing our ground, upholding values, and no longer abandoning ourselves or sacrificing our well-being, even in the face of judgment, insults, and manipulation. So that was really huge this week. The balance of responsibility, right? When a member of the family, especially with the holidays, right? Sometimes we will feel compelled to do things that aren't in our best interest, right? We'll feel compelled to overspend, or to shoulder too much responsibility, right? Or just feel the pressures of the social interactions, and kind of lose ourselves a little bit, lose our values a little bit. Had a lot of conversations about that in session work about that, and just honoring our own needs, right? Particularly for sensitives, intuitives, empaths, artists, with that artistic temperament, that intuitive, psychic, really empathic person. It can be very challenging. So not feeling that pressure, and not taking on that harsh energy. A specific incident for me came from the comments of a viewer on this channel attempting to guilt me into providing more and more attention, validation, and wisdom. I was definitely triggered, as rescuing others can be a temptation to empaths instead of empowering them, but I still didn't want to be pulled out of my value of being kind and empowering others. So I called on the mercy of the Justice card, as I explained that he was giving his power away by asking me to care for part of him, and that I no longer create those types of parasitic relationships. And he wasn't even subtle about it. I couldn't tell if it was a troll or what, but it was like a comment on every single video wanting my attention and feedback, and it didn't relate to the video at all. So it was just disheartening. And I said that he was attempting to guilt trip me by saying, I'm depending on you, Rachel. Don't forget to respond to my comments. And so I went through one by one, and after I responded with tough love and firm boundaries, the comments were just deleted. Like a day or two later, I went back and I was like, because I was sort of bracing myself for harshness or rudeness, and I kind of figured that's what was going to happen. He would try to guilt me and hook me in some more. So I was bracing myself and preparing. And I felt like if that energy comes to me, I'll just block, right? I'll just block him. But I sometimes just have a sense like, okay, let's just give this person a chance. So that's what I did. I just answered the questions. And I also felt like, if the answers remained there, if the interaction remained there, it might show other people that they can stand firm too. And they don't have to have these guilt trips, given to these guilt trips, right? Oftentimes someone will come to you, if you're a light worker, if you have a brilliant light, if you're an empath, a sensitive, a healer, they'll come to you and say, here's a part of me, here's a piece of me, please take care of it. And that's why we get into these unconscious agreements, right? And we shoulder more responsibility, and it's not helpful. It doesn't help them, right? It actually creates heaviness for them too. It's heavy for us because we can't digest that. We can't care for it. It's not ours. But we somehow feel, it's usually based on family system, right? Ancestral trauma or unspoken agreements in the family system. And then we go create that out in the outside world, all over the place. We just think that's normal. And it just becomes heavier and heavier and heavier as we shoulder so much burden. And it's heavy for the other person too, because they're missing a part of themselves. They've given it away. So I was like, I encourage you to stop making these the contracts and agreements everywhere. Just take back the parts of yourself you're trying to give away, and give back the parts of other people that you've taken. It's just too heavy. Like, it sounds really abstract, but if you're sensitive to energy, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So can we ask, what are these contracts that I'm currently carrying? Can we renegotiate or even destroy? Discouraging dependency creates order. Okay? Creates order in your family system, right? Sometimes we're caregiving for a parent, right? Taking on the emotional burden. It's out of order. That's too heavy. So we take our proper place and we find, oh, all this energy frees up. I feel more freedom, right? Oh, something else that came up was Chiron, a comet in astrology that represents our deepest wounds and is referred to as the wounded healer aspect, right? It moved from Pisces to Aries this week. So we may find that we are more active now in our healing process, taking steps to create lasting change. And I associated that with receiving a medical diagnosis that addresses so many health concerns I've been experiencing most of my adult life. And not only do I know what the actual underlying cause is, but I am to optimize my health. Instead of theorizing, I am clear about what I need to do. I was cut off, so I don't know where I was cut off. I'm sorry. Now I'm clear about what I need to do to optimize my health instead of theorizing and experimenting. I'm done being a walking experiment. And I finally have clarity. I got down to the truth of the matter, and it will change my life. So it'll change my life for the better. So last week, I think it came in about balancing, unless it's later in this chapter, balancing, holistic and homeopathic medicine with Western medicine. They work together. And I was choosing one over the other, right? I was choosing holistic. I was choosing natural. I was choosing homeopathic because I just had lost hope in Western medicine, but I found a really good doctor. And I think that's the difference. I've had very subpar practitioners in the past, and maybe science hadn't gotten to the point it needed to get to, who knows, but I'd just been failed so many times and had a lot of trauma. So we talked about that last time. But this week I really balanced that out. And with all that I know about optimizing my nutrition and everything like that, for that to work hand in hand and to see it in the blood work, it's really encouraging. And I feel so solid and stable in that, instead of relying on one more than the other, right? Because I even think Western medicine can be incomplete. So not addressing nutritional concerns and things like that. So I've invested a lot over the years in really getting clear about the nutritional needs of my body and all of that. So working hand in hand with the Western medicine, it's really powerful. So that Chiron, right? Working actively to heal. We actually did an exercise in the Business Alchemy program, meditating on actions that we can take to achieve our goals. They're referred to as alchemy items in this process, even if it seems unrelated to the target goal or undoable. We're just kind of clearing out the cobwebs, seeing what's there in the subconscious. I actually have something I brought back from New York. A yellow star that says joy. It says the word joy in it. It's like a wall hanging. It's made of wood with a metal hook. It might even be a tree decoration. I don't quite remember where I got it. But I used to hang it in my bedroom. And I have it hanging out on my front door, thinking, let me invite joy in and have joyful experiences come in, attract them. It's been so weathered that it's nearly white, and you can barely make out the word joy on it. So I was guided in this meditation. An action step is to clean that, clean it, and hang it inside instead, to symbolize joy being sourced from inside of me, rather than chasing it on the outside. And then an action step to really stay in touch with joy is singing and dancing daily, getting in touch with that emotion of joy, that state. That was also part of the guidance that came in. Again, going back to, can I start with a state of joy, working from a state of joy instead of I'm obligated to do this, right? Because that means for me exchanging vitality for money, and particularly with work, right? That's been a thing. I mean, a lot of people have that association. So that's something I want to weed out. And I think that will have great consequences and long-term shifts in my career. And with the whole making a hobby, the thing I read about 471, the meaning there, creating, opportunities from your hobbies and joys in life. I was invited to be a reader, tarot reader, at an event that's hosted by Ramblin' Mike in Burbank, California, at the end of March. So who knows what will come of that? But that was another synchronicity and opportunity that I attracted in through intention with this Business Alchemy program. So I'm excited about that. And then one last thing that kind of came in, there's many more, but it's already it's so much. I mean, I could share so much, but I don't mean to make it so long. Okay. So Peter Hyatt, if you haven't heard of him, he's an expert and instructor in statement analysis. And he posted a video this week about the case of a missing woman and her daughter, Heidi Broussard, and her daughter Margot. And he analyzed Shane Carey, who is Heidi's fiance. He analyzed his statement, and he talks about how we unconsciously use language when we haven't been rehearsed or prepped, of course. So we're looking at like initial interviews, statements, 911 calls, things like that. He analyzes. He looks at what someone shares and what they leave out. The pronouns used, distancing language, all of that. And he listens. He questions, why might they be sharing that? Of all the things they could share, why did they share that? He's really interesting. I really enjoy his work. It's just really fascinating to me. He talked about, he has videos posted, Peter Hyatt, Hyatt. He has some analysis he did like on a whiteboard. He did with the McCann case, right? JonBenet Ramsey. He talks about like some of the things in the statements that needed to be looked at. And he even talks about how sometimes there's embedded confessions. Like you just listen. He'll say, you know, why did this person share drinking water here? Chances are they needed to wash away some guilt about something, right? Why did they share that of all things? They could share, why did they say that first, right? They look at what came first. What's the use of pronouns? It's all like this unconscious way we use language. And it's just, I would love to study it someday. I just love stuff like that. I think it's so fascinating. Just how we make choices, you know, what motivates us, and language. I can't get enough of it. I just find it endlessly fascinating. Yeah, there are often embedded confessions and other hidden facts leaked out into these interview answers. And I think leaking is another study, and it's less accurate. I think this statement analysis is really accurate. And again, it's not interpretation. He's not interpreting what they're saying, but he's asking, why are they sharing this? What would someone who is telling the truth typically say, right? What would the typical answer be if they were actually in this scenario? And what's the typical use of pronouns here? So why would they say it like this? It's really, really interesting. I encourage you to check that out if that sounds interesting to you. Peter Hyatt. And in these interviews, he not only shares his analysis, but explains his conclusions, teaching his viewers. It's endlessly fascinating to me and changes the way I listen when others speak. I would love to study this someday. It demonstrates how the truth cannot be long hidden, right? It leaks out. And you might have an instinct or an intuition that what someone's saying isn't true, or that they're hiding something, or they're being deceptive. And it's just a sense. It may very well be the way they're using language. So check it out. See if that's something that you're interested in. That's how the justice showed up for me this week. In part, right? There's so much more. It's hard to keep track of it all, but I was floored by the impeachment. I mean, whether or not, like I said, you believe that's just, wow. We did that, you guys. No, I'm kidding. We're responsible for that. No. So let's get into the Hermit. Let's talk about the history of the Hermit first. I'm going to get this information from the Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination by Robert M. Place. Again, this will be in my Amazon store, linked in the description if you're interested. So the history of the Hermit. Have you been looking forward to this week? Is this a week you've been dreading? What's your relationship to the Hermit? Let's learn about the history. So, Robert writes, as we have said, the second act in the Trumps is concerned with the soul of will and embraces asceticism instead of sensuality. It is not surprising, therefore, that the next Marseille Trump depicts the Hermit, a Christian ascetic. The oldest images of the hermit, however, found in the hand-painted Milanese decks depicts a hunched old man holding an hourglass. These early representations are a true symbol of time, similar to the illustrations for the triumph of time in I Trionfi. Just as the figure of justice was based on images of the classical goddess Dike, the figure of time is derived from the image of the classical god Saturn, who was the god of time and was also depicted as a hunched old man. This personification of time was commonly associated in Renaissance art with images of fate and death, and we find these same subjects depicted on other cards in this section of the trumps. In the Italian woodcut decks from around 1500, the image changes to a holy hermit holding a lantern instead of an hourglass. And there's a picture of that. This change in imagery reflects a change in attitude toward the god Saturn and his astrological influences. In the early Renaissance, Saturn and time were viewed as a negative, destructive force. But toward the end of the 15th century, due to the influence of Ficino and his Neoplatonic Academy, Saturn came to be seen by some in a positive light as a god of contemplation and artistic genius. By changing this trump from an embodiment of old age and deformity to a contemplative hermit, the tarot is reflecting the Renaissance Neoplatonic view. The Neoplatonic hermit was also chosen for the French decks. On this card in the Tarot of Marseille, although the hermit is hatless, he is depicted as a similar bearded man in a robe, standing with a cane and holding a lantern to light his way. Hermits were solitary Christian ascetics who patterned their practice on that of St. Anthony of Egypt, 251 through 356. St. Anthony was a prosperous Egyptian peasant who gave his property to the poor and retired into the desert to live in contemplation. St. Anthony's example inspired emulation, and there were many practicing hermits in the 3rd and 4th centuries. Because of the austerity and dangers of solitary existence, however, the communal lifestyle of the monk eventually became a more common expression of religious devotion. In the late Middle Ages, Christian mystics, desiring a purer form of devotion than that offered by the monastery, once again began to emulate St. Anthony. As we saw in Lull's 14th century romance, Blanquerna, the title character joined a monastery to find peace of mind, but found himself entangled in church politics and eventually became pope. It is only when he resigned his papal position and became a hermit that he experienced the divine illumination that he sought. And you might recall that story. Blanquerna came up in the week of the Hierophant, right? Which is a reincarnation of the Pope. It was once known, the card was once called the Pope. The Marseille hermit is holding his lantern high at eye level. This is a symbolic gesture that indicates that he is seeking something. This gesture is derived from descriptions of the famous pre-Christian Greek ascetic Diogenes. 412 through 323 BCE. Diogenes was a cynic, a branch of philosophy that believed true value was only found through the rejection of the comforts and conventions of civilization. References to Diogenes were common in the Renaissance. In a tarot deck painted in the 15th century for the d'Este family, the rulers of Ferrara, Diogenes is depicted on the sun trump. The illustration depicts the famous anecdote in which Diogenes, who was living in a barrel, asked Alexander the Great to step away from the opening of his home and stop blocking the sun. Besides living in a barrel, Diogenes was said to go about the city in daylight holding a lantern high before him, as a symbol of his quest for a virtuous man. The Tarot's hermit seems to be on a similar quest for virtue. So that's the history. History of the Tarot card of the hermit. Let's get into the Waite-Smith symbolism. The Waite-Smith symbolism of the card. Number 9, right? Associated with Virgo. What's with the Waite-Smith symbolism? The Waite-Smith hermit is based on the Marseille image, except that his robe is dark and his hood is up, which strengthens the mood of isolation and contemplation. Also, he is on a mountaintop. He has mastered the virtue of the Strength card and climbed to the top of the distant summit. So remember, we're a bit out of order. We did Justice last week instead of Strength because that was the order in the Marseille deck. So when we were talking about the history, we jumped from the Chariot to Justice because it made sense in the story, in the history. So with the occult symbolism and order, when the occult took over the symbolism, a Strength card would have followed the Chariot, not Justice, right? So the fact that the impeachment happened, if we weren't even in order, right, technically, right, because Justice is 11, if you recall, and so we're kind of jumping back order, right? And the Hermit is 9. So just in case you forgot or weren't following at that point. The image is also influenced by a picture in the Hermetic Museum. On the title page, there is a print of an alchemist in a long robe with a stick and a lantern following the Anima Mundi, symbolized as a beautiful woman. And the Anima Mundi is a principle regarded by some as animating the universe, much as the human soul animates man's body. An intrinsic connection between all living things on the planet and a vital force or principle conceived of as permeating the world. So it's this concept, right? This concept of connectedness, of animation, of what animates us, right? This vital force. And the Hermetic Museum, which was referenced, is a book. It was a book published in Latin in 1678, a compendium of alchemical texts. A compendium of alchemical texts. So on the title page of that book, the alchemist is following the Anima Mundi, depicted as a beautiful woman, and she is holding a glowing 6-pointed star, a symbol of the masculine upward pointed triangle and the feminine downward pointing triangle, joined as one power. Here, the star is in the hermit's lantern. The hermit represents seclusion for the purpose of meditation and attainment, but he can also simply mean the state of being alone or of going outside of the group. He is a pioneer who lights the way for others. And it's Christmas week. I mean, that gave me a little bit of a chill when I thought of that, you know? Going outside of the group, a pioneer who lights the way for others. Whose birthday was celebrating here? I know, it's actually a pagan holiday, but I thought that was interesting. So let's get into the divination. What might it mean if the Hermit card shows up in a spread, right? It's associated with the zodiac sign of Virgo, self-discovery, contemplation, getting on the journey, solitude, feeling alone, spiritual journey, disconnecting to go within, spiritual lessons, on the journey to enlightenment, retreat, prudence, also and especially treason, dissimulation, corruption, roguery. The hermit is not so much about being lonely as taking time to be solo, to be one, to seek inside. The hermit does not seek foreign shores for self, for spirit, or for wisdom. He finds it within. He shuns the common knowledge to discover what he himself already knows. Sometimes I can't read my own writing. He shuns the common knowledge to discover what he himself already knows. We are told by society that we are born knowing nothing, and therefore we must accumulate it from external sources. The hermit has found that indeed the source of knowledge, true knowledge, is within. He may seem a little odd to a world that expects all to be in pages of a book or in the hands of experts. Yet what he learns from within can be a guiding light to those same people. He can write the books and inspire others to do the same. He goes within to give out. He asks you to do the same. The Hermit is the 9th trump or major arcana card in most traditional tarot decks. The Hermit suggests that you are in a phase of introspection where you are drawing your attention within, drawing your attention inwards and looking for answers within. You are in need of a period of inner reflection away from the current demands of your position. Soul searching, introspection, solitude, withdrawn from society, meditation, self-reflection, inner guidance, being alone. Signals a sign to go on retreat or a sacred pilgrimage. Contemplate your motivations, personal values, and principles, and get closer to your authentic self. You take this journey alone or with a small group of spiritually minded people. Tuning into your inner guiding light, you will hear the answers you need and grow wise beyond your years. Hermit often appears when you're at a pivotal point in your life and considering a new direction. Looking at life with a deeper, more spiritual understanding, a few of your priorities will change as a result. I just heard a gunshot or firecracker or something. That's why I was startled. The Hermit also represents the desire to turn away from a consumerist or materialistic society to focus on your inner world. Finally, the Hermit may appear in your life as a spiritual mentor here to raise your vibration and enhance your consciousness. The beauty of this is that while he may be an expert in his own right, he will teach you how to find your answers within you. Rest and reflect during a period of retreat and introspection. Take time to absorb the lessons that you have learned so far before you continue on your journey. 9 represents completion, near the end of the journey. Reflection, study, detachment, solitude, introspection. The journey the Hermit is embarking on isn't as hopeful as the Fool's, nor full of passion like the Chariot. Instead, it's an inward journey. So that's what we're about to experience this week with the Hermit. So now let's further integrate the Justice Week, right? That immersion, those experiences that we drew in to help us understand and gain some enlightenment. And let's call in experiences with the Hermit card with some sound. So go ahead and focus on those experiences of the Justice Week. We'll further integrate them. Anchoring in that archetype, right? Integrating it. Getting into a greater state of wholeness as we collect these experiences and really illuminate this for ourselves. Where we stand. Is it coming in from, is the experience coming internally, right? Are we having internal experiences around it, around the archetype, or is it coming externally? That can provide clues about how integrated that aspect is. And let's call in synchronicities around the Hermit. How are we going to experience that spiritual retreat? Virgo influence, maybe people under the sign of Virgo. The number 9, completion, going inside, right? This will be interesting Christmas week, looking at consumerism, right? Looking at consumerism, materialism, putting that in check and perspective for ourselves. Christmas is often a time of togetherness, so that'll be interesting with the Hermit as well. How will we experience it this week? Close your eyes and get in touch with your breath, and allow this sound to help you further integrate and carry your intention far and wide so those experiences and synchronicities can come back to you. Beautiful. Coming back to the room. So thank you for liking the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell so you can participate in the premiere of these videos. Almost to 500 subscribers. I would love to make that first goal of 500 before the new year. So thank you for subscribing. That's really valuable to me. Thanks for commenting on your experiences with the tarot, with the card of the week. What were your experiences and how did the information come to you? I'd love to know. If you're interested in a private reading or session, more information about that will be linked in the description of this video, as well as the Amazon store if you want to pick up any of these items. Go to the Idealist Journey Through the Tarot. And I'm really excited about our week with the Hermit. Wishing you all a safe and joyous and peaceful holiday. I'll see you in the next video. Bye, Empath.